Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about time blocking. So this is a kind of process or strategy that I use for a lot of planning in my daily life, and I think it can be really useful to pretty much everybody, but especially people who have a lot of projects that they want to get done, but they're not really sure when they have time to actually work on these projects. To do time blocking, all you really need is some kind of timeline. You can just draw this out if you want. For me, I'm going to be using the Passion Planner weekly layout, so I'm not going to be talking about all the extra stuff here. I'm just going to be using these timelines. And you can get a printable just like this for free if you sign up for the Passion Planner email newsletter. So you can grab that, or you can just print off any kind of timeline that covers the times of day that you want to be blocking out. And just a look at what this looks like. I use like a physical Passion Planner. I started with printables and really liked it. So I got an undated one that starts on Mondays, and some of my weeks look like this. I like to play a lot with the style of how I fill things in. So sometimes I'll just do words, sometimes I'll block it out with a marker. Sometimes I'll miss days, and that's okay. And sometimes I'll miss like most of a week, and that's okay. I just get busy sometimes. Time blocking is a tool that you can use as needed. You can use it every day. You can use it once just to get an idea of what a typical week looks like and then stick to that routine. There's a lot of different ways you can use it. So, to demonstrate, I'm going to be planning out an entire week, and I'm going to be picking a specific week that I know is coming up that is kind of unusual for me, because I'll get to show a lot of different types of events and how I would work them into my time blocking schedule. Normally in my real planner, I will block out a day in the morning, so I won't usually do a week in advance, but I feel like showing the entire week will allow me to demonstrate a lot of different options at once. So that's what I'm going to do. And what I'm going to be using is a couple of Tombow dual brush pens. I like these really light pastel ones because they can be used kind of like highlighters, but they're just a little bit more flexible because they have the small tip at the end and the brush tip at the other end, and they're so pale that you can write on top of them very easily. So whatever you want to do, I find it's helpful to have different colors for time blocking so you can easily see at a glance where certain tasks are going to go, but it's up to you. If you would rather use all black pen and just write things in, that works just as well. A lot of this process is flexible, but I do think the most important thing to do first is to block in appointments or things where the time is not negotiable. So if you know you have to be at work at a certain time and you have to be there until a certain time, put that in first, because it's going to make it easier to fill in the other things around it. So I am going to start with green, and this is going to represent my day job work. And I'm going to demonstrate a couple of different ways of filling in. So sometimes I will just highlight the entire blocks just like this, and I might leave a gap for when I eat lunch if I want to do something else productive on my lunch. Another blocking strategy I've seen is to just highlight the times like this, and then you can just write in what you're doing at the beginning of each block. It's a little bit of a tidier way to do it. Another way to do it would be highlighting the entire beginning section, and this just kind of makes it a little bit more visual. And like I mentioned, you can also just do pen and no colors at all. And the way I would usually do this is either just a line down the side, or I would enclose it in a square like this. So you can see different ways to fill this in. And the week I have in mind, I actually do have Friday off, so I'm going to leave that blank for now. And the next thing I know that is not negotiable is if I need to be at work at a certain time, I know about how long the commute is. And I like to either use plain pen or like a really muted color for commutes. So this I'm just going to use a light gray. And I know that's going to take about an hour. And if you know what the blocks mean, you don't even have to label them. I am going to label these ones just so I remember. And this week I'm also going to be taking a little trip. So I know when my flight is going to be, and there's going to be a flight departing on Tuesday and returning on Thursday. And I like to use, for kind of really critical, time-sensitive things, I like to use a bright color, like yellow. And also, if you usually work with just plain ink, you can also add splashes of color to denote very important things. So if I was doing this in pen, I might just highlight the flight time because it's very important that I don't miss my flight. And you can add as much or as little detail to these notes as you want. Something to keep in mind is if you have blocks that you want to use kind of as a to-do list as well, if you leave space underneath them, or if you leave the blocks blank like this, you can then go in and write tasks. So if I know that when I get to work on this day I want to work on a certain thing, I can put a little to-do list in here, and I can put as many tasks as I want. And another thing that I do that you may have seen on my Instagram is sometimes I'll just put a little bit of a recap of what I did after the fact. So I'll block it out in advance and then I'll write in what I actually did. So you can use the time blocking in advance to plan things out, and then you can also use it in the moment when you're doing task planning, or if you just want to journal a little bit. And then also this week I know that I'm going to be going to a little party, so I'll fill that in as well. And then I know if I want to get there, I'll have to be driving around at these times. So once we have all of the things that absolutely need to happen, you might be tempted to put in what you feel is the most important, which would be, your project work, your side work, whatever work you want to find time for. But really, it's important to save that for last and think about the time you need to take care of yourself, to run errands, to keep your house in order, cleaning, personal care, showering, eating. You want to make sure that you have time for all of these things before you try to put the work in, because if you are a workaholic like me, you might be tempted to work first and worry about self-care later, and that's when you end up really stressed out. You end up living in a filthy house and eating junk food because you didn't plan to cook anything. And this is kind of a cycle I've fallen into a couple times, and it can be hard to get out once you feel like you're behind on everything. So from the beginning, think about taking care of yourself and taking care of your house and your family, and you can have a much more realistic view of the time you have for side projects. So to start out, I like to think about sleep. So let's say, for example, that I want to go to bed around 10:30, and I want to wake up around 6 or 6:30. I'll need to start getting ready for bed around this time if I want to get up early enough the next day. And I know that once I have woken up, I need to, feed my dog, shower, put clothes on, get my lunch packed and everything. And I know that takes about an hour. So I'm just gonna do a little block like this. for the hour after 6 o'clock when I wake up. And just the time might be enough for me to remember what this is, but I can also write in morning routine. Then I have to think if I want to maintain this routine on weekends and days off, or if I want to give myself a little bit more breathing room. In an ideal world, I would get up at 6 every day, but we often don't live in an ideal world, so I'm gonna put this at 8 on weekends and days off. And these are decisions you'll have to make for yourself to decide if you want a different routine for weekends or certain days of the week. You know, some people do not work 9 to 5, they might work in shifts. If you do work evenings, the Passion Planner may not be the best timeline for you, so just print out or draw out whatever timeline works for you. This one has worked for me fairly well. Sometimes I wish it went a little later because I have some night owl tendencies, but for the most part, I should be awake during these hours every day, so it works just fine. And I just want to remember that I'm gonna have to get up earlier on the Monday after the Sunday, so I do still want to get ready for bed earlier. So after thinking about waking up, going to bed, we have to think about eating, showering, any other kind of personal care you might do. You might have a meditation habit that you want to maintain. You might have an exercise habit that you want to maintain. For me, my commute is fairly active, so I don't do additional exercise right now, but I do want to make sure I have time to make and eat dinner. So I'm going to block in a time for dinner from 6 to 7. And for me, since I know I'm going to be out of town, I'm not going to be home during these 3 days, on a typical week, I would definitely leave most of the evenings here blank because I won't actually know what my routine is going to look like in an unfamiliar place. But just for the sake of demonstrating, I'm going to fill this in as if I know where I'm going to be for this entire week, just to show you what a complete week looks like after it's all been filled in. And I might also fill in lunch here. Oops, that's a little wobbly. It's okay though. And if you want things to be a little bit cleaner, you can just make this a little bit less in your face. And I like to at least plan a time for lunch on days off and weekends, though this does tend to get shifted around a little bit on the actual day because my weekends are not quite as rigid as my work days. So I just estimate times for these and then remember to leave space for myself to move things around. And if you're wondering where breakfast goes, for me, I typically eat breakfast at work or I eat it during my wake up time on the weekend, so that is just kind of included in these blocks here. Okay, so I've thought about sleep, I've thought about eating, I've thought about exercise. If you wanted to do exercise in the mornings, you might fit it in after your morning routine or in your morning routine. You can also put it at the end, before or after dinner. Like I said, my exercise goes in my commute because I bicycle most days, so other things you might think about, like I said, are meditation, or if you know that you want to take time to read before bed every night, you might block that in. Think about things that you know you want to do, but they don't really feel like work, so you tend to prioritize them lower. If these are things that you feel are important to your everyday life, putting them in your plan is a way to make sure that you have the time you need to actually do these things. So we're finally at the step where you would start to think about projects. And if you're anything like me, you feel a little disheartened at this point because there's not a lot of time left. There's not a lot of time if you have a day job. After you do all your work, you have dinner, You make sure you're sleeping enough, you fill in your appointments, social engagements that you might have. There's a couple of hours usually, and this can feel really disheartening. It also gives you a chance to revisit priorities, maybe trim down some projects that are not important enough, because if you only have 3 hours tops to work on something every night, you want to make sure that something is important to you and that what you're getting out of it is helping you grow or it's fulfilling you in some way. If you only have one project you're working on, that can make this very easy because you can clearly see where your blocks of free time are and just fill in your project there. For me, I tend to have multiple projects or commitments going, so during the month of April, which is where this sample week is coming from, I am working on the 100-day project, which for me is doing a digital drawing every day. Though these days while I'm out of town, I might either try to front load some drawings, or I might try to catch up, or I might just do 3 paper drawings. It's not a big deal, I can figure that out when I get to it, but I know that each drawing takes me 30 minutes to an hour. And I also know that I'm doing some writing this month, so if I want to write 1,000 words, that's at least an hour for me. And other things I might think about is time for videos that I'm recording, just like this one. I might think about time I might need for programming projects. I always have a couple of those going. There's a couple of different ways that you can block out these projects, and the first one is the easiest. You can just say this color. I usually use this nice coral color for it. I can say this color is for time to work on personal projects. You can just fill in all the free time you want to spend doing focused work, and then when you actually get to it, you can write in the specific things you want to work on, or you can assign each of these things their own color and then try to plan out time for specific projects in advance. And I've sort of flip-flopped between these 2 different strategies, and I like them both. Just blocking out time for productive work and deciding what I'm going to do later is best for busier weeks or weeks where I don't have any specific deadlines. But if I do, like say I want to get a video out on Saturday and I want to specifically plot out when I'm going to work on it throughout the week, I'll usually give that its own color. So let's say video is pink. Let's say I want to do all of this other stuff is going to share this color. Now there's a couple of things to be aware of when you're filling in your project work time, and one is it's almost definitely going to take longer to accomplish something than you think it will. So if you are being very specific and you're saying like, oh, I want to do this task here in an hour, and this task here in 30 minutes, and this task here in an hour, those estimates you're making may not be accurate. So it may take longer, it may take less time. Almost always you want to estimate things too long so that you have a little bit of a buffer, or you want to leave spaces between each of your tasks. So here I might say for an hour I'll work on my 100-day project, I'll have a little bit of a buffer in between, and then for an hour and a half I will do some writing. And if these are things I need to be doing every day, I can just carry them over to the next day, just like this. And don't forget about time that you might have in the morning. A lot of people who do writing like to do it in the mornings when they're fresh and they have a lot of that creative energy kind of replenished before it gets drained a little bit from working. So don't forget you can do some stuff in the morning as well. And a lot of times, if I have a lot of projects that I want to make progress on, is I will assign certain days to certain projects. So maybe this day I'm working on writing, and this day I'm going to work on programming. And just to revisit the video idea if I'm planning ahead to finish a video in time to post it. Let's say I want to post it Saturday morning around 10. Then I know that, let's say these videos usually take me 2 hours to do. I can plug in 2 hours on Friday. I can plug in an hour on Thursday and an hour on Friday. Here, I think I'll do that one. And if you have projects that you can break into pieces like this, that can help you estimate things a little bit more accurately. I'm taking all the different pieces into account separately rather than estimating the entire video at once. I'm separating it into pieces so I can more accurately figure out how long each of these pieces are going to take me. And the best advice I've ever gotten for estimating how long things will take that you've never done before is to come up with the most realistic time estimate you can and then double it. And it seems like a lot. It seems like a really extreme thing to do, to double the amount of time. But what this does is it gives you plenty of room to finish the task if something goes wrong. It accounts for the time it takes to get started on doing a project and kind of winding down from that project. And also, if you are consistently giving yourself a set amount of time to do something and failing to get it done in that amount of time, it can really wear down your motivation. Even though the initial estimate was just an estimate, it does give you that feeling that you failed at something, when you haven't really, it just took longer than you thought it would. So giving yourself plenty of time to do things is way better than trying to be super exact and super precise and missing the mark a little bit. And if you have a day where you're not really sure what you're going to be doing, it's totally fine to leave it blank because we've already done all this other work where we've put in what we know, and so we have a very clear window of time that we can fill in when we get to it. So don't feel like you need to plan out every single minute of every day in advance, except in cases where you have a very well established routine. It's not going to be accurate, and so sometimes it is better to just leave things blank and then you can fill them in when things are a little bit more certain. And another thing to be aware of is that even if you know you don't have to start getting ready for bed until 10, if you are the kind of person who gets a little bit fatigued mentally or physically in the evenings, if you know that even though you have the time to do some work between 9 and 10, but you usually can't get much done because you're so tired, you can fill that in, or you can just draw a little cutoff line that you're not going to do any work after a specific time. And for some people, that time might be 5 o'clock when they're done with their workday. For people who have both a day job and a passion project, you may not have that luxury, but you can always just define it a little bit later. Like if I wanted to stop working on anything productive around 9 and then just kind of coast the rest of the night, that would be perfectly fine. For weekends or days off, I tend to block out time a little bit more loosely. So instead of filling in specific time blocks like I've done here, I might just go in and write the things that I want to get done. So maybe on Friday, I want to vacuum the house and I want to run to the store. And the pitfall here is if you're not blocking out actual time, you might plan out too much to do. So in some cases it might be better to block things out in terms of time, but maybe not connected to the timeline here. So say that I know the vacuuming is going to take up 30 minutes, and I know that the store run is going to take an hour and a half. You can kind of use this as a sort of progress bar and just start at the beginning and highlight all the time you are using up for all these tasks, so that if you get to task 3 and you've already filled up all of your available free time, you know that adding more tasks to that day is not really a good idea. So that's another way to look at your available amount of time as more of a bucket rather than specific times of day tied to specific tasks, if that makes sense. And after months of trying to plan out my weekends for optimal productivity, I realized that I just don't have the mental space needed to move from one work task to another, to lunch, to work. My weekends are just not that rigid. And so, what I like to do is plan out blocks of time where I'll work on things, but leave at least 30 minutes of transition time between them, or I'll just leave a random block of an hour to do whatever I want, because the weekends are a great source of time for people with day jobs. You might be tempted to just gobble up all that time for your passion project and make a ton of progress, but the weekends are also our time to refresh ourselves, to relax, to recoup all of that energy we've spent throughout the week. And if you're consistently planning to do work across your entire weekend and then not doing it, you run into that same thing where it feels like a failure, even though that's not really what it is. It was a difference between expectations and reality, not a personal failure. So, keeping in mind your limitations and planning for those limitations are how you're going to take this time blocking and turn it into a positive thing rather than something that makes you feel like you're not doing enough. And for a similar reason, I like to make sure I'm not planning more than maybe 2 hours tops of consecutive work on a day where I'm very tempted to be a little more laid back, because it's not realistic. I'm not going to sit down on a Saturday morning and work for 5 straight hours on a single project without taking, a break for lunch or a break to play some video games or watch some TV. So I try to keep those limitations in mind as well. Being realistic, keeping limitations in mind are going to give you a time blocking plan that is something that's going to make you feel good about what you're doing and feel like you're making a lot of progress. When you're going through your plan, try to think about things that need to get done on a less rigid basis and make time for them. Because if something comes up that you need to do, but there's no time in your plan to actually do it, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to just not do it, which might have consequences of its own, or you might push something out of the way that you really wanted to do, and then now that thing gets, carried on to the next week. And this is how we end up with projects that we have been meaning to do for months at a time that just aren't getting done because we aren't being realistic about our plans. So that's an overview of how I do time blocking, and at the end you should have something that looks like this. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to see real examples of what my passion planner looks like, feel free to check out my Instagram, where I will occasionally post pictures of my planners and journals. And don't forget to subscribe here to see more content like this. I'll be back soon with another video. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!